The MoneroTopia Price Report segment is sponsored by Exolix, a privacy-focused, non-custodial instant crypto exchange. Go to exolix.com to enjoy secure and completely anonymous swaps with no KYC or sign-up. Swap between Monero and 2,000 plus assets at the most competitive rates and with no limits. Exolix.com, your fast and secure way to privacy.
All right, guys, we'll try and keep this short. I know that you guys are at a conference and probably have people have stuff to do. All right, so we're looking here at the Monero price. Obviously, this is the daily candles, and things are looking good, guys. This is obviously looking towards the upside. We are slowly, continuously pressing towards this upside here, which again coincides with those very long-term standard deviations that have bound price for something like 2 years now. So it might not necessarily break immediately, although it could. I think in general, we're looking at positivity in the crypto markets. So what we're really looking at is either to break this soon, or maybe we got to do some of this and, another little bit of pullback. But right now, this is setting up for sometime in the next, let's just say 0 to 4 weeks, this thing should break towards the upside. At least from a technical analysis perspective. I know how many of you are just in love with technical analysis to the same degree that I am. But yeah, so we're looking all right on the Monero price. You can't complain about hanging out in the 220 area, especially when not that long ago we were hanging out in the 150 area for a very, very long time. So yeah, hopefully soon we're going to reestablish some sort of higher normalized stablecoin price. This is effectively what I would expect. Realistically, what I expect is some major push towards the upside. We might even like double tap that 500 area, like the one that we hit in the last bull market. And it wouldn't surprise me to take some time to break that. We might tag it, come to the top side, do something like this, right, at some point here. It could take the rest of the year, but I am looking for eventually a Monero to like actually break out. Then at some point, we're going to have some very long consolidation period. That's just how we have to expect price to roll. It's very similar to the gold price. Let's take a look at the XMR BTC ratio. This line, which was previously kind of a support line, kind of broken down a little bit. Now it's becoming more of an average trend line, if you will. Hopefully we could just continue to oscillate around this line, but I wouldn't necessarily expect that because, Bitcoin is still pretty strong. Yeah, there's no strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's not Bitcoin, it's crypto. That's really what it is. And Trump has said that numerous times. I don't know if any of you guys saw this, but there was an executive order where Trump created some working group on crypto. The number 2 point there was about stablecoins. So it should be no surprise to us. He's like, no CBDC. And kind of as we've talked about for a long time, they're making concessions, but these are token concessions, because when he's like, no CBDC, it's like, yeah, they're just trying to capture that popular movement that nobody wants a CBDC. But the backdoor CBDCs have already been set up. It's Tether, it's Circle, USDC. And they're going to track and surveil that way. They're going to have a nice, warm, welcoming, open ecosystem for everybody. And then they're going to start to clamp the gates down slowly over time after the network effects have been captured there. Not too unlike what's happened with Bitcoin, where you can't actually use it very well for cash unless you just want to go spend a bunch of time learning how to do Lightning Network in a sovereign way. Nobody does that. Most of them just use it custodially, or they hand all their privacy information away to some Lightning service provider. Anyways, the point on that is that there's like just a general broad bullish kind of thing going on here in the crypto movement at the moment. Privacy coins, let's skip the privacy coins. Maybe we could talk a little bit really quick. ZANO has had a big pullback here. How much is that? That's about 35% from the top. Yeah, so ZANO's had a pretty big pullback. Let's go down to the 4 hour and see where the wave magic are telling us that supports should be found. Realistically, this should be some kind of support, at least for some interim moment. You'll notice again, we've got the bands, right? What we really kind of expect is not to just break down immediately to go towards the big obvious areas, which would be down there. We would kind of expect a little bit of oscillation here first, and then maybe it might break down, or maybe it'll break to the top side, right? Wave magic at this point wouldn't exactly tell you that it's breaking towards the top or the bottom. Right now, this doesn't look like the best pattern, but yeah, we won't dwell too long on this. I have more things I could speculate about the ZANO price. Everything else here on the privacy coin space is just kind of like flat, not doing much. Whereas Monero seems to be pushing the upside, as we talked about, right, where it's sort of moving towards the upside of its local highs. The rest of these privacy coins all seem to be kind of moving towards the downside. of their previous local highs, which that shouldn't surprise us too much. I don't really believe that these privacy coins have a whole lot of actual volume or support or organic buying in the way that Monero does. So a lot of this volatility, I think, is easily induced by people who want to kind of push price around and make a buck or a few bucks off of what's off the volatility that's happening. So right now you can see Bitcoin is basically for the past week been reducing its volatility. We're on the 30-minute chart. Let's actually go out a little bit higher to the bird's eye view. I always like to start with the bird's eye view and then drill down to the smaller time frames. I think in general that's a better way to learn, but specifically for price, I prefer to do that. So in general, what you can see, again, we talked about this. We had a nice big movement towards the upside. These purple bands, again, this is what I call wave magic, because it's just magic how price came immediately to that purple band. And then that's where it started having problems with price. It kind of tried to move up a little bit, and it kind of, it's really taking a longer time to get there. So right now at the moment, you can see that, let's drop down here to the 2 hour. You can see that Bitcoin is still effectively exploring the standard deviation bands, right? These blue bands and the orange bands. We're on the top side of them, and this is why I say things look bullish from a technical perspective on the Bitcoin chart. It definitely is the case that effectively what you can see, Bitcoin is now trying to get above the shorter term upper standard deviation bands. It's kind of riding in there. This is the kind of chart that you expect at some point should want to try and push towards the upside again. And it could be one of these situations where it's just mildly positive for some period of time. That wouldn't be an unsurprising pattern. I'm not exactly predicting that. But one thing I really kind of did want to point out to you guys is that after coming here from this sort of fake out bottom down here, this was definitely a fake out. And after those wicks finished and you got back into these orange bands, you kind of knew that was a fake out, and you really could have taken along there. Anyways, the point is that it had a nice big run up here, and then you've got this big volatility, and then you can see the volatility is starting to squeeze. Part of that is because the weekend hit, right? So the past couple of days, weekends tend to have a little bit less volatility. Don't make me prove that here on the stream right now. Maybe I could prove it some other time, but generally speaking, right? Other markets are closed. The big finance bros have gone home, so like a lot of times, sometimes weekends can have even more volatility if some big news comes out, right? Because the liquidity is a bit lower on the weekend. So if there's a bunch of big movements happening on the weekend, then you could have higher volatility. But right now, there's not a huge whole bunch of stuff, happening over the weekend. Anyways, volatility has dropped off. That's kind of a sign that, hey, you could probably expect this thing to start moving one direction or the other. So I would expect that we're still looking at some kind of bullish scenario here, generally speaking, in the crypto markets. Bitcoin dominance has managed to hang on, guys. I don't really know how or why exactly, but it is managing just barely to hang on. But again, we had the Trump coin. He's a crypto president, not a Bitcoin president. It's hilarious to watch the fucking maxis lose their shit over this, and they deserve it. They were like, oh, my Trump presidency and vote for Trump because he's going to have the Bitcoin strategic reserve and all this other stuff. And it's like, they're like, they thought, he did a good job, right? He tricked them. He said just enough to fucking tantalize their nipples. And they were like, yeah, it's Trump, and so they just like, oh, they did all the sexual innuendos that we could make there regarding their savior, and then he rugged them with his Trump coin and then Melania coin. So yeah, I think that shit's fucking hilarious. But again, still somehow Bitcoin dominance is managing to actually do pretty good. I mean, it's still right. Let's take a look here. It's still within a few percent. That would be 4% of its recent all-time high. And it did manage to get back into this channel here after a period of time. I still think there's a good chance that altcoin season is coming. Maybe it's never coming. I don't know, guys. It's possible. There's a lot of altcoins out there competing for attention. In a more general sense, right, here's the larger market cap altcoins. And everything's just kind of like, trailing sideways, basically. Nothing really major happening here. Link seems to be at the top of that. We've talked about Link before. I say, hey, a lot of times Link will go first. You'll see Link smash towards the upside, and that's a good sign that the rest of the crypto market's about to follow. I think that's because they run the oracles. Link is sort of tied into a bunch of different contracts platforms. And I think that's a reason, like they're moving money, they're making bets, they're placing bets. And so Link ends up with a big boost in market cap as money starts moving and rotating into other parts of crypto. So we'll be looking for that. If you see Link starting to smash towards the upside, that's probably a good sign that that we're going to be looking at the next leg up here in this bull market. Right now, ETHBTC, I wanted to cover this because we are getting very close to these very long-term lines. In fact, we could even go to the weekly to make this a little bit more clear. ETH is now, right, this was like the 2017 bull market. This was the 2021 bull market. And you can see these massive, very long-term standard deviation bands that have been compressing, right? These bands are actually now compressing. And so this right here is an extremely obvious area. If you hypothetically wanted to play the ratio on ETH versus BTC, this is a very, very obvious area to expect some kind of support. ETH is kind of at max FUD at the moment. I really would expect that this thing should come towards the upside. The way that this is formed now, the way that these bands have formed, it's going to take some really big doing to get out of this band structure now at this point. I mean, it did try to crush it once there. It was unable. It has now made a massive slide back to the downside. It's going to make another attempt probably in the bull market to get there. Yeah, the chances of ETH actually gaining market cap parity with Bitcoin are slipping away. So my call is going to be, perhaps my call there, I'm going to have to eat those words. But that's fine. I kind of did want to see, the flippening memes start to get loaded, but maybe that's just not going to happen. Anyways, in a real sense, I do expect that ETH is at least going to try and challenge the upper side of these bands here at some point. And hypothetically, if the government leans in hard on stablecoins, right? If they go hard on Tether and USDC, there could be a good chance that ETH actually benefits from that some. So, anyways, that's just something to point out there. I always do this out of order. I don't know why, but here's the Monero transaction, still oscillating around 30,000 roundabouts. So, yeah. You know what? We had a super chat here. Harold Bishop tipped 25 cents. He says, the Monero chart is looking bullish. Indeed it is, sir. Yes, indeed it is. Thank you for the tip. So here's our transactions oscillating around 30,000. Come on, guys. Let's buy those drugs on the dark web and get these transactions up to like 40,000, 50,000. Just kidding. Don't do drugs, kids. It's bad for you. Drugs are bad. All right. Here's the macro. We'll talk about the macro and then we'll call it a day. So Dixie is taking a little bit of a break. Here's another kind of corroborating point on the whole, tea leaves, technical analysis, astrology for dudes. We're corroborating what charts are saying. And one of the corroborations here would be that, wow, that looks awfully like a little bit of an interim peak there. In fact, you might want to call that a little bit of a head and shoulders even. It's a little itty bitty head and shoulders. So we'd be looking at about right here for the stopping point. If we're going to say that, Dixie's going to take a break. But the fact that Dixie is now in a little bit of a short-term downtrend could be some impetus, right? That could provide a little bit of juice for the markets to make their way towards the top side. So, it might be worth, I really need to get back into it a little bit more hardcore, but I need to look at the recent correlation or anti-correlation between Dixie and all the different assets. Because sometimes it oscillates in and out of being correlated and not correlated, but generally speaking, risk is anti-correlated to Dixie. Okay, whatever. Oil, we've talked a long time. Once the macro crash is going to happen, an imminent sign to us is that oil is crashing ahead of time. It's like it did this fake out, like, hey, we're going to pretend to beat this long-term capping resistance line right here, and then it got back down under it. So this line right here is a very long line that goes back to the previous bear market. So I guess kind of it makes sense. This is why I like to use both the pleb lines and the wave magic in tandem, because you'll notice here's the upper standard deviations, right? And it managed to beat the downtrending line for a moment and then touch those standard deviations, and now it's coming back towards the downside. So this thing getting back into this zone is just not good bullish action. I really do think that they're trying to stave off for as long as they can any macro crash. It would make sense, but I think they know it's coming, so they're going to try and like keep oil propped up and supported. Another price guy that I used to follow, not so much, he says oil is the lifeblood of the military-industrial complex, and indeed it is. So they're going to try and keep that propped up for as long as they can, but at some point the demand-destroying event will cause that to crash down for a period of time. Gold is doing good, guys. Gold has made a rebound, and so this is the daily chart, and we're basically sitting here really close to the all-time highs now. If we drop down here into the 4-hour, we can see a little bit better the standard deviation bands and how effectively, again, as we've talked about, right? You come up here, you set these bands, you set this band structure, and then you play around inside of it, right? Usually with decreasing volatility. And then finally, once these bands start to curl towards the upside, that's your sign that the bull market is about to commence. And so or that at least another leg up is about to commence. I don't want to get ahead of myself there, get too excited, but yeah, gold here is effectively now above those bands. They're curling up. It's got room to run here towards these purple bands again. So yeah, we could be seeing another big leg up in gold. I don't know exactly how high this thing could go or is going to go. But yeah, I mean, at the moment, definitely looking good. Okay, yeah, so that's what gold looks like. Reverse repos, not doing anything, just hanging here down at the bottom. There's $100 billion left in reverse repos that could hypothetically go into risk. So there's still a little bit of juice to squeeze. That doesn't have to happen, right? Reverse repos don't necessarily have to drop to the 0 point. They might, they don't have to. Right now, obviously, the trend is down. But if we see reverse repos coming up here and then starting to break out of these orange bands, finally, these will become like relevant for us. If we see something like that, that's another good sign. Hey guys, that the bull market's going to be over, right? That's we'll be looking at that kind of stuff to sort of corroborate our top call. Obviously, ideally, we'd like to see the Bitcoin price hit the upper regression boundary, which currently sits at about $170,000. Let's see. There's going to be a Fed meeting next week. They're probably not going to raise rates because markets are going fucking crazy. So here's the S&P 500. S&P 500 set new all-time highs this week. It's still like, so remember, this line is the 1929 blow-off top line. We draw this line because it goes all the way back 100 years. So we're basically like at just levels of liquidity and market expansion that rival 1929. But they know the system way better. They've developed their Keynesian theories over a long period of time. They've gotten way better at it. So who's to say that they can't keep that going, that this line can't get broken? The S&P is actually, and the NASDAQ are extremely, extremely exponential. And it's funny because you wouldn't think so because they go up so steadily, but they go up way more than steadily. It looks like it goes up steadily, but when you really do the analysis, you start realizing, holy fuck, this is really, really exponential. So you kind of have to I've had to invent some statistical tools even just to track the way that those markets respond or behave. So anyways, the point is that S&P is doing good. Let's just go ahead and leave that behind. We'll talk about bonds really quick. Let's go to boring bonds. So bonds have done a little peak. They've come back down to the downside. I don't know where these are going, guys. Again, we're looking for lots of volatility in the bond market as a signal that things are about to crash. I wouldn't call this excessive volatility in the bond market. I would call this normal volatility. But this is a pattern that we've seen, right? The Fed is lowering rates where suddenly the long end of the curve starts to correct and spikes up above the Fed rates finally. And then at some point, when this curve has become uninverted enough and then starts to become really uninverted, and then everything starts to crash towards the downside. That's the pattern we're looking for. Maybe like the handlers, the Keynesian economists, maybe they know the pattern so well now that they're just like, no, we're going to pull a different pattern on the plebs this time. It's possible, right? But anyways, I have to believe that the bond market is such a massive, massive part of the economy and the way everything and prices are oriented around it. I have to believe that it's just communicating something far more fundamental about the economy and the patterns that we see going into these macro crashes. I really have to believe that this is the evidence of what's happening in the background, and that it's not just such a simple matter for them to say, oh, do the reverse this time. I don't think that's the case, that they can do that. So anyways, just a little bit of, kind of open brainstorming speculation there for you guys on what I think about bonds and whatnot. Other than that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here and hand the show back to Tux and Doug. Thank you very much for your time.